Today we're starting section 1.4, 1.5. We're going to condense these sections because they're pretty easy. And we're going to be focusing on writing equations of lines and finding the average rate of change. So just to kind of recap some formulas from last year, our slope, which is the same thing as the change in y over change in x, which is our average rate of change, is found by doing y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And once you would have your slope, you would use the equation y minus y1 equals m times the quantity of x minus x1. So we're just going to do a quick review on problems where I give you two coordinates, we find the slope, and then we write the equation of the line. So if the coordinate is -3, 6, and 3, -2, and they want us to write the equation going through the line. The first information that we'd have to find first is our slope. So remember, this is x1. I write it above actually. So this is x1, y1, x2, y2. So we find our average rate of change, which is our slope, or our m value. So we do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And notice you have to keep the signs. It's always subtracting, but then you keep the sign of the value. So in the numerator, we'll get -8 divided by a +6. So we can reduce this to be -4 over 3. We don't want to put the slope as a decimal, especially this decimal, which would be a repeating decimal. And now we pick one of the two coordinates to use, so I'm going to use the second one. And we do y minus our y value of -2. And then our slope value. And then x minus the x value. So over here, this will become y plus 2. We need to distribute, so this becomes a -4/3 x. This is like a 3 over 1, so when I multiply the tops and the bottoms. So it'll become +12 over 3, which I can reduce to just be +4. And then I need to subtract 2 from both sides. So the equation of the line equals y equals -4/3 x plus 2. And again, purely Algebra 2 concept, we're just doing a quick recap on that lesson. The next thing we're going to talk about is average rate of change when we're not talking about a linear function. So the last equation was a linear, it was a straight line. So now we're going to talk about finding average rate of change when it's not a straight line. So f of x equals x squared. And you are asked to calculate the average rate of change from our x1 value being 0 to our x2 value being 3. And recall that this is a parabola, so we know our function looks something to this effect, where we have this U shape. So again, we can't find the exact slope, but what we can say is if I'm saying from 0 to 3, I'm finding the average rate of change between those two values. So to do that, I need to find both of these matching y values. So the way you can kind of think about it is that I have the x value of 0 and I have the x value of 3, and I need to find their matching y values. So I plug it in. 0 squared is 0. 3 squared is 9. And now, remember, average rate of change means, well, how much do the y values change over how much the x? And I think one thing we talked last year about is the shortcut. So instead of using the formula, you could say, okay, from this y value to that y value, I went up 9 units. From these x values, I went up 3 units, which means my average rate of change is a +3. When you use the shortcut, you always need to make sure that you pick one coordinate and you go from that coordinate to the next. So like I went from this coordinate to this one both times. So you just need to make sure you need to follow that pattern, and it's always the y's on top, x's on the bottom. So let's try another one. F of x equals 5t squared. And they want you to find the average rate of change from 2 seconds, we'll just say 2, from 2 to 2.5. And again, we have both the x values. We need to find the matching y values. So when x is 2, I need to find that y value. And then when x is 2.5, I need to find that y value. So the 2 we could do by hand. So 2 squared is 4. 4 times 5 is 20. The 2.5, when I square 2.5, it's 2.5 times 2.5. And then I multiply the answer by 5. And the result from doing that is a 31.25. So now I have my y values. So now I need to find the change in y over the change in x. So from this y value, I went up 11.25 units. My x values, I went up 0.5 units. And when I divide these two, I get an average rate of change of 22.5. So again, it's pretty straightforward. You just have to simply input your values and get your outputs. Last thing I want to go over, and again, another Algebra 2 concept, is parallel versus perpendicular. So the information that's given is there's a coordinate 4, -7, and they want a line that's perpendicular to x minus 2y minus 3 equals 0. So if you remember from last year, parallel slopes are the same, perpendicular slopes are opposite reciprocals. So I know what coordinate I need to use, but I don't know is the slope. And in order to find the opposite reciprocal of it, I need to know the slope itself. So I need to work with this equation first. And I need to get y by itself so I can determine what value is the slope. So to do that, I would need to subtract the x over, and I need to add the 3 over. So -2y equals -x plus 3. And then to get y by itself, I divide everything by -2. So y equals 1/2 x minus 3/2. And again, this is coming from this right here. I had a -1x divided by -2, and that's why the slope became a half. So right now, the slope is 1/2. If I wanted to use the perpendicular slope, I would change this to its opposite reciprocal, which would become a -2 over 1. So now I need to go back over to the problem itself, and I need to write the equation of the line. So using the equation from the beginning of the notes, I do y minus the -7 equals the slope of -2 times the quantity of x minus 4. And I distribute these. I have y plus 7 equals -2x plus 8. Subtract 7 from both sides. And y equals a -2x plus 1. So to kind of recap, I had to use this equation first to figure out the slope. Then I changed it to be perpendicular. And then I used the formula and the coordinate that was given to write the equation of the line. So that's all for today. We'll pick up with this tomorrow.